If you're captivated by stories of clever revenge and the power of patience, subscribe to our channel to never miss a thrilling tale. I never thought a single message could feel like a physical blow. The text blinked on my phone, cold and unyielding. It's over. Don't contact me again. At first, I sat in stunned silence, trying to understand how the person I trusted most could vanish from my life with such casual cruelty. But it wasn't just the breakup. It was the way he had laughed at me while delivering it, the cruel satisfaction in his words. In that instant, a quiet, deadly resolve took root inside me. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't chase. I wouldn't crumble. I would wait. I would observe. And when the time was right, I would ensure that the sting of betrayal returned to him tenfold. I started noticing it immediately, the smug face of arrogance that had always been there. Now amplified by his freedom, every photo he posted radiated overconfidence, every boastful comment a declaration of superiority. He mocked struggles I had shared, ridiculed dreams he once claimed to admire, and wore his charm like armor. He didn't notice the cracks forming beneath that confident facade, the subtle evidence of carelessness that only a quiet observer could see, and I watched. I smiled inside, knowing arrogance often precedes a fall. Tears had come at first, tears I allowed myself to feel in the privacy of my room, letting anger and sadness intertwine into something sharper than either alone. But grief quickly gave way to resolve. I whispered to myself between sobs, a silent vow that no one else would ever see. This heartbreak will become my strength. His betrayal will be met with calculated precision. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted inevitability. I wanted the satisfaction of knowing he could never see it coming. From the shadows, I began to learn. I observed his habits, noting the patterns in his social interactions, the predictable ways he flaunted his successes, the subtle insecurities he tried to hide behind arrogance. I documented everything mentally, every slip of pride, every whispered secret. The more I watched, the clearer the web became. I understood his strengths, but more importantly, I understood his weaknesses, and I waited. Patience was my weapon. Small moves, seemingly insignificant, were my first tests. I left subtle hints, small ripples that unsettled his confidence. A carefully placed comment here, a discreet question there. Nothing that could be traced back to me. And yet the seeds of doubt began to sprout. I watched as he overreacted to minor provocations, flustered when praised or criticized in equal measure. Every misstep confirmed my path, every slip a reminder that arrogance blinds those who think themselves untouchable. I wasn't alone. Some allies came unexpectedly, their loyalty unseen, their information invaluable. From whispers overheard to documents obtained, I pieced together a fuller picture of his actions and intentions. Each piece of intelligence made my plan sharper, more precise. While he remained oblivious, I strengthened the strategy, weaving a web he could never anticipate. And then he stumbled. He underestimated the depth of my observation, the care I had taken to ensure each detail was accounted for. He revealed a secret in confidence, bragged where discretion was required, laughed too loudly at his own cleverness. Each moment of arrogance became a building block in the trap I had been assembling, and I knew the tipping point was near. The first strike was subtle but effective. A rumor carefully planted, a misstep highlighted among his peers, enough to shake his polished reputation. The look on his face when he realized that something was amiss was almost delicious. He began questioning who could possibly be capable of undermining him with such precision, unaware that I had orchestrated every move from the safety of silence. From there, the escalation was methodical. Each action revealed more of his lies, greed, and hypocrisy. Friends he had trusted began to doubt him. Colleagues he had manipulated began to notice inconsistencies he couldn't explain. Every revelation was timed perfectly, designed to amplify embarrassment while ensuring the consequences could not be ignored. My revenge was not loud, but it was unstoppable. The masterstroke came on a day he would never forget. Carefully orchestrated, undeniable evidence of his deception, his betrayals, and his manipulations reached those whose opinions mattered most. There was no accusation without proof, no shame without reason. The humiliation was public, the exposure complete, and I remained unseen, untouchable, the architect of his downfall. The fall was swift, yet inevitable. His charm, his power, his carefully cultivated image, all crumbled under the weight of the truth. The same arrogance that had guided him to mock, manipulate, and betray now left him naked and powerless. Every attempt to regain control failed. Every apology rang hollow. He understood too late that pride had been his undoing, and that I had waited patiently to ensure his collapse was total. I didn't gloat. There was no need. Satisfaction was in the quiet knowledge that justice had been delivered, that intelligence and composure had outmatched cruelty. I moved through life with the same calm that had guided my strategy, letting the consequences speak for themselves. And in the aftermath, I rose stronger. Betrayal had shaped me, but it did not define me. The wounds had healed into wisdom, and the heartbreak transformed into resilience. I reclaimed my life with a clarity that he could never hope to disturb again. The past was behind me, and the future, unshaken, untouchable, and fully mine, stretched forward like a promise kept. Living under his shadow had become second nature, though every day reminded me of the weight I carried. He thrived on belittling me, flaunting his superiority at every possible moment, as if my very presence existed solely to highlight his triumphs. Every conversation, every social gathering, every shared moment of life seemed engineered to showcase my supposed inadequacy. Yet beneath the sting of humiliation, a quiet spark of understanding began to grow. I could see him, his patterns, his arrogance, and the way he underestimated those around him, especially me. He was a master of facades. Charm dripped effortlessly from him, a carefully crafted armor that masked his relentless mockery and obsessive desire for status. He spoke with ease, laughed at the right moments, and projected an image of success that few dared to question. But I had begun to notice the gaps, the way his manipulations faltered when unobserved, the obsessive attention he gave to appearances, and the subtle contempt he harbored for any ambition not his own. What others saw as brilliance, I recognized as brittle, dangerous pride. The breaking point arrived unexpectedly, but with precision that left a lasting mark. In front of colleagues I respected, he dismissed my contribution with a casual sneer, turning a simple disagreement into public spectacle. Laughter followed, and I felt the familiar burn of humiliation. But this time it sparked something deeper than hurt. That cruelty, so blatant and arrogant, ignited a hidden fury, a clarity of purpose that would not be denied. I realized that pain could be transformed, and that his strength could become the instrument of his undoing. I chose quiet strength over immediate reaction. I observed, storing every insult, every sneer, every manipulation as data, a map to guide the future. While he basked in his self-assuredness, I learned to watch, to catalog weaknesses, to note the cracks in his carefully constructed armor. Each insult became fuel, each condescension a reminder that patience could turn humiliation into power. Those cracks were subtle, but undeniable. Recklessness, overconfidence, and an obsession with appearances revealed fragility beneath his polished exterior. He missed deadlines, overextended himself socially, and relied on flattery where discipline should have reigned. I recognized the patterns of someone who could fall if guided carefully toward their own mistakes. The seeds of potential downfall were present. My task was to wait, to nurture the conditions quietly. Patience became my ally. I made the deliberate choice to wait, to allow him to continue believing he held all the control. I would build strength, sharpen insight, and prepare a calculated response. Immediate retaliation would be visible, messy, and ultimately insufficient. By choosing silence and observation, I embraced a power few ever see before it strikes, one that grows slowly, methodically, and inevitably. Hints of his impending collapse appeared almost like shadows dancing at the edges of awareness. Small missteps went unnoticed by others. Subtle betrayals of his own arrogance whispered themselves to me alone. His own actions foreshadowed consequences he would never anticipate. The inevitability of karma tracing its path through his carefully curated life. These whispers were invisible to the world, but I recognized them, understood their weight, and held my resolve. Silence became my weapon. Every moment I resisted the urge to confront, every occasion I chose not to react, strengthened the unseen power I wielded. He expected desperation, weakness, perhaps even tears, but none came. By embracing restraint, I allowed the universe itself to conspire with me, letting his own arrogance do the work I would later perfect. Restraint became a force far more dangerous than immediate action. The long game began in earnest. Each small move I made, each observation noted, each alliance quietly formed, added layers to the meticulous strategy I had been constructing in shadow. Nothing was rushed, nothing left to chance. Every interaction, every slip he made was carefully woven into the fabric of a revenge that would unfold with precision. I became patient, calculating, almost invisible, while preparing to turn his world upside down. And finally, I made a promise I whispered only to myself. He wanted me weak and desperate. Instead, I learned the power of silence, and silence builds empires. That vow became the foundation of my strength, the driving force behind every calculated choice, and the beginning of a reckoning he would never see coming. In learning to endure, observe, and wait, I had forged an unbreakable resolve, and with it, the certainty that his arrogance would become the architect of his own downfall. I buried myself in silence, dedicating every hour to growth and strategy. While the world assumed I was nursing heartbreak, I was quietly rebuilding a life that belonged only to me. Investments, career moves, skills honed with meticulous care. No one noticed, and that was exactly how I wanted it. The emptiness that once felt like loss became a canvas, and I painted every stroke with precision. My success would emerge not as a boast, but as an inevitability. The quiet proof that I had always been capable, always in control. Memories of betrayal came unbidden, sharp and unmistakable. I recalled the countless times he twisted words, exploited trust, and stole opportunities meant for me. Each flashback revealed a layer of deceit, small lies, calculated manipulations, the theft of both confidence and fortune. I did not rage at these memories. I archived them. Each act of cruelty was transformed into data, into fuel for a plan that would be executed with surgical precision. The pain became instruction, and the humiliation became strategy. Every day I built strategic wins, layer by layer. I studied finance with relentless focus, refined my business acumen, and cultivated self-discipline. Small victories, nearly invisible to outsiders, accumulated silently. A stock purchased at the right moment, a skill mastered in private, an opportunity seized while no one watched. These wins formed the backbone of a revenge that was patient, calculated, and unstoppable. With every disciplined act, I grew stronger, richer in both knowledge and means, while he remained blind to my quiet ascent. Meanwhile, he flaunted a life of ostentatious luxury, parading status symbols and appearances that masked instability. Cars, parties, and fleeting social power painted a picture of triumph, yet the cracks were already forming. Debts stacked quietly in the background, overextensions ignored, and a reputation built on superficial charm teetered on the edge of collapse. His arrogance blinded him to reality, and I watched carefully, knowing that the illusion of success was often more fragile than the truth it disguised. By remaining silent and distant, I gained a psychological advantage few could understand. He believed I was powerless, still reeling from past events, still weak and vulnerable. This illusion fed his overconfidence, leaving him reckless and unaware of the storm silently gathering. Every conversation I avoided, every interaction I declined, strengthened the invisible chains I was slowly weaving around him. He had no reason to suspect that I had already outmaneuvered him in the game of patience and preparation. I began to build an invisible network. Alliances formed quietly, resources secured, and key people aligned without ever revealing my hand. Each connection was a piece of the puzzle, each opportunity a tool that would later expose his vulnerabilities. While he strutted through life, enjoying imagined victories, I was assembling a lattice of influence, intelligence, and leverage. Everything was converging, unseen and unstoppable. As time passed, cracks in his armor began to appear with subtle clarity. A careless remark here, an overcommitment there. The same arrogance that had once humiliated me now revealed weakness to those who watched closely. I cataloged each misstep, calculating the perfect moment to act. Every flaw, every lapse in judgment, became an opening, a doorway to the reversal I had been quietly constructing. Patience became my power. Every insult, every slight, every belittling act was transmuted into energy for my long-term plan. The longer I waited, the stronger my position became. The world saw calm, distance, composure, but beneath that exterior, a storm was gathering. I was not reacting. I was preparing. Every moment of restraint added precision. Every day of silence sharpened strategy. And every memory of betrayal reinforced the inevitability of his undoing. The seeds of the trap were planted, though he remained blind to the architecture of his downfall. Alliances, knowledge, and resources converged silently, forming a structure that would soon hold him accountable in ways he could never imagine. Everything I had endured, everything I had learned, was being distilled into a force of consequence. Every action I had taken, every step I had planned, was drawing him toward the collapse he had unknowingly invited. And finally, I whispered a promise to myself, a vow that resonated with cold clarity. Every insult he ever threw at me, I turned into a stepping stone, and soon, those stones would crush him. The echo of that vow carried forward through my strategy, through every investment, every quiet triumph, and every calculated observation. It was more than revenge. It was inevitability, the manifestation of patience, intelligence, and silent determination ready to reclaim everything he had sought to diminish. He had always presented a flawless image, a man untouchable in his world of charm, money, and carefully curated appearances. Yet even the most polished facades can crack, and his did so in the most unsuspecting way. A critical financial misstep, a reckless investment made on impulse, began to unravel everything he had so meticulously constructed. I watched from a distance, noting the tension that flickered in moments he thought no one could see. The man who had once belittled me, confident in his untouchable status, was suddenly exposed to the fragility beneath the veneer. Whispers began circulating, almost imperceptibly at first. Friends, acquaintances, social circles, the people who once applauded his bravado, started noticing the reckless spending, the mounting debts, the signs of mismanagement he had ignored for too long. Yet he remained blind, arrogance blinding him to reality, convinced that charm and audacity could conceal every flaw. I felt no satisfaction in their murmurs. I simply observed, catalogued, and let the patterns emerge. Every misstep, every word of self-assured dismissal fed the plan I had nurtured in silence. Then, with desperation seeping into his voice, he reached out to me. His pride had been replaced with the illusion of hope, the assumption that I remained weak, vulnerable, still reeling from the past he had so cruelly engineered. He spoke carefully, words coated in false humility, seeking advice, assistance, or perhaps forgiveness. I listened without reaction, every carefully measured response maintaining a mask of composure. The power had quietly shifted, though he remained blissfully unaware. Calmness became my armor. I spoke nothing of the past, gave no indication that I had built a life far beyond his comprehension, that every resource, every connection, and every lesson had positioned me beyond his reach. His tone, once commanding and dismissive, now carried an almost pleading edge, revealing cracks in his confidence. I did not move. I did not react. I allowed the silence to speak volumes, letting him unknowingly demonstrate the reversal of control. The trap began to take shape in these conversations. I guided discussions subtly, planting questions, encouraging revelations, and observing the flaws he revealed with each word. His overconfidence, his habitual need to boast, and his desperation all became instruments I could play. I remained untouchable, a mirror to his unraveling, letting his arrogance draw him closer into the net I had woven long ago. Every casual boast, every careless admission, became another brick in the foundation of his downfall. Watching him kneel, figuratively if not literally, was a study in anticipation. Each desperate plea, each poorly chosen phrase, each admission of miscalculation brought him nearer to the inevitable. He had no idea that every word, every movement, every attempt to assert control only advanced the plan I had cultivated in silence. His ego, once a shield, now led him directly into the heart of his own undoing, and I remained steady, unmoved, and entirely prepared. Finally, the position was perfect. I had maneuvered him to a point where his arrogance compelled him to expose every flaw, every secret, Every mistake he had assumed could remain hidden. I held all the pieces, fully aware that his next steps would complete the trap. His own hubris had orchestrated the final act of his downfall, and I needed only to remain patient, calm, and precise. The power of observation, restraint, and preparation had converged into a silent checkmate, and there was no escape. And as the truth of his recklessness and vulnerability fully settled around him, I allowed myself a single quiet thought, a vow that carried both closure and warning. The man who once swore I'd be broke forever didn't know it yet, but he was already kneeling. Every insult he had thrown, every slight he had inflicted, had become a stepping stone leading him exactly to this moment. The reckoning had begun, and it was mine to execute with perfect control, patience, and inevitability. He had always believed that wealth, charm, and a carefully crafted arrogance could shield him from consequences. Yet arrogance has a brittle foundation, and mine had been patiently observing the fissures forming beneath his polished exterior. When he reached out, his voice unsteady and tinged with humility, asking for money, advice, or support, I recognized the unmistakable tremor of desperation. The man who once dismissed me at every turn now pleaded, unaware that every word he spoke fed the advantage I had silently cultivated for years. I did not respond with triumph or taunts. Calmness became my weapon. I let him speak, his words revealing the extent of his recklessness, the depth of his debts, and the cracks in the empire he so proudly displayed. My silence spoke louder than any insult. Each pause, each measured reply, allowed him to feel the illusion that he was still negotiating, still holding sway. Yet the truth was clear. I held all the cards, and the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Then, at the precise moment, I began to reveal just enough to stun him without mercy. Casual mentions of new ventures, subtle references to investments that multiplied beyond his understanding, hints of influence in circles he had long coveted, all served to illuminate the chasm between our paths. His eyes widened as reality settled in. The success he had assumed I lacked had already surpassed him, leaving him exposed and humiliated. The carefully constructed image he carried so arrogantly had no foothold against the quiet mastery I had built in his absence. Every word he had ever thrown at me, the sneers, the dismissals, the scorn, now echoed back in a precise and deliberate reflection. I let him see, piece by piece, how those moments became instruments of his own undoing. A dismissive comment once spoken lightly now mirrored his incompetence. A sneer once meant to diminish me became a marker of his folly. Each insult, recycled in strategy and precision, deepened the shame he could no longer hide. As the weight of realization pressed down on him, he grasped the irreversible reversal of power. He was no longer the master of the narrative. He had become a spectator to his own collapse, a participant in a story where he held no control. Every desperate plea, every feigned confidence, was met with the cold clarity of a plan executed flawlessly. He could see it now. The psychological dominance that had always been his weapon now belonged to me, and his former strength crumbled in the face of my composure. And as he faced the truth, the final piece of the reckoning settled into place. For the first time, he could not laugh at me, nor at anything beyond himself. The mirror he had once shattered to belittle me reflected only his own failings, and in that reflection, there was no escape. Every assumption, every arrogance, every false sense of superiority had been turned inward. He had become the embodiment of his own humiliation, while I remained untouched, calculated, and indomitable. For the first time, he couldn't laugh at me, because the only thing left to laugh at was himself. His carefully constructed world of wealth and influence began to crumble like dry plaster. Deals he had boasted about fell through, investors vanished, and the social circles that once fawned over him now whispered about mismanagement and arrogance. The ex who had mocked my ambition, who had believed his charm could bend everyone to his will, now faced the unrelenting consequences of his reckless choices. Bank statements revealed deficits he could no longer conceal. Friends distanced themselves, and invitations to events that once showcased his status became conspicuously absent. Each day, the proud image he had curated with such care eroded, leaving a man exposed and increasingly desperate, yet still blind to the true source of his undoing. Meanwhile, I continued in silence, my victories accumulating quietly. Unnoticed by those who had underestimated me, my investments flourished, opportunities multiplied, and my reputation for competence and integrity grew beyond question. I did not boast, I did not gloat. The power lay in the quiet assurance of my success, in the freedom to move without interference or fear. Every step I took, every achievement, served as proof that intelligence, patience, and strategy could outmatch anger and impulsiveness. My triumph spoke louder than any revenge could, leaving the ex to flounder in the shadow of the very empire he thought he had eclipsed. Eventually, he reached a point of undeniable need, humbling himself in ways that were once unimaginable, yet I refused to intervene. No hand was extended, no advice given, no safety net offered. The man who had believed in his invincibility now struggled under the weight of his own arrogance. He grasped too late that every misstep, every reckless decision, was a direct result of choices he had made with pride rather than prudence. And in that bitter reckoning, the truth of karma revealed itself, silent, exacting, and irrevocable. As the dust settled, I stood firm in the knowledge that intelligence and restraint had triumphed where anger and impulse would have failed. The ex's pockets were empty, his image shattered, and his arrogance rendered meaningless. And yet, I carried no bitterness, only a quiet, enduring sense of vindication. In the end, the final truth remained undeniable. He once told me I'd be broke forever, yet in the end, it was his pockets that were empty, and my silence that made him beg.